The Tubescreamer. This is one of the pedals that I've seen that there've been, you know, people like Bukovac and Rhett Shull talk about online, and, you know, sort of profess that they're really not fans of the Tubescreamer, and I used to kind of push back against that. But I think they might have a point. So I was going to make this video and then plugged it in and instantly was like, well, that's an absolutely great tone for me personally, just bridge pickup into a Tubescreamer, into my normal line 6 kind of litigator preset. So what is actually going on here?
This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
So I've had the Keeley Tone Workstation on my pedal board for, you know, about a year now, maybe a little bit longer. I bought this because it's one of those kind of pedals which is pretty useful, and then gradually I got kind of sick of it. Now it's got a compressor, the blues breaker / katana, and then over on this side they've got their essentially Keeley version, Keeley modded Tubescreamer. Whenever I'm playing live, anytime I click this thing on, well, except for one time, I guess I'll talk about what that one time was, I was kind of like, that's not great. So what would happen is that I'd be kind of looking for a rhythm tone. I'd flick to my bridge pickup most likely, and then what happens with the Tubescreamer, because of the EQ of the thing, is that it rolls off a little bit of bass, rolls off a bit of highs, and boosts the mids a little bit, right? And I just ended up feeling like it was kind of pretty weak, and then, yeah, would just turn it off and turn on something different instead. That's been basically my live use of this side of the Tubescreamer for quite a while now, so I kind of thought I'm done with Tubescreamers, basically. I think I've been doing the thing wrong. So the one time that I did find that the Tubescreamer kind of had a real use was when I was using the Friedman Dirty Shirley clone, the head first thing. I used that on a gig, and I was like, this is a little bit scooped, and when I kick on some extra drive, it's still a bit scooped. The Tubescreamer actually, in that case, kind of solved a bit of a problem there, which is like, well, now this is a lead tone that I'm enjoying playing again. And I think maybe that's the point about the Tubescreamers, that it's actually quite a specific tool, which does have its specific set of uses. That may not be the best pedal ever, but I think actually it does do some things really, really well. For example, I've got a Ibanez metal screamer on the floor down here, and here's my clean tone. And then if I kick on the Tubescreamer, that's how I like to use a Tubescreamer, kind of not like I've seen many people using them in general. So maybe using like the Mick from that pedal show approach, like setting everything at 2 o'clock as a starting point is quite nice for this. Into a clean amp, what it gives you is that basically what was the precursor to the Dumble tone, essentially, that very mid-forward kind of saxophony tone. And the reason that Howard ended up making the ODS, as the story goes, is that he saw Robin Ford playing with a bassman and a Tubescreamer, and that was kind of the tone that inspired him to, as the story goes, as told by Robin. And I think instead of thinking of the Tubescreamer as like your bog standard drive pedal that is going to sound good in certain circumstances, it might make more sense to think of it as something kind of Tubescreamer-esque. Obviously Tubescreamer-esque is not what I mean, but Zen Drive-esque. So if you're going for like the Robin Ford Zen Drivey vibe, a Zen Drive is essentially a bit of a modded Tubescreamer. The Tubescreamer has been modded in lots of ways, but oftentimes the Dumble side of things is kind of around the Tubescreamer design. If you're looking for kind of tight gain, all that sort of thing, you're going to already need to be going into a driven amp. I think that's one other way that Tubescreamer is used quite a lot, is just with the gain all the way off and just kind of boosting the level and then doing a little bit of tone shaping in front of an amp. You see like people like Leon Todd talking about folks doing that. That happens all the time. And I guess in that case, they're looking for the bass roll off to kind of tighten things up so that you're hitting the front end of your amp with less of a bassy signal, which makes sense. But one other thing that I've seen that Analog Man Mike was talking about, there's like a blog that he's written about some of the mods they do and all this sort of stuff. Eric Johnson, we're always coming back to Eric on this, talked about buying like 15 Tubescreamers and picking out one or two that he liked best. According to Analog Man Mike, they're quite variable, and so finding the Tubescreamer for you might be a thing. This is one that I really like and is not dissimilar to the TS10. Now the TS10 is actually a little bit different to some of the other Tubescreamers. I think it's got less components rather than more. I think it's the case with these, but the TS808 is like the holy grail thing that Analog Man Mike mods back to. In general, they're all, to me, are within a similar kind of wheelhouse and all have the same sorts of problems where it's like potentially muddy depending on your rig, potentially rolling off too much bass. What's going on, kid? Ah! What do you think about a Tubescreamer?
Come on then.
So this is the Keeley one. Drive all the way up. So those are two, pretty different Tubescreamer circuits that end up in context doing a very similar thing. And I think that is probably how it works for quite a lot of Tubescreamers. Analog Man Mike says that some of the mods that bring back more bass end up kind of creating really muddy situations. And so I think his advice was basically to go for the 808 mod, or just basically go for something else. They're trying to make them sound as close to the vintage 808 as they can, not make it sound like a different pedal. In terms of things that do something somewhat similar but with less of the Tubescreamer-ish problems, I think about something like the Marshall Blues Breaker, which can kind of be quite a nice rhythm tone. I don't think the Tubescreamer necessarily makes a great rhythm tone. I think in general it should be thought of, for it to work better, either as doing that thing of like shaping the tone into a higher gain thing, Or just think about it as like a lead channel or something can stack as a lead channel. Put it after a fuzz, for example. It does really wonderful things. So yeah, I would have been happy to say, you know, I've fallen out of love with Tubescreamers altogether, but plugging it in, it's like, actually, if you're looking for this specific sound, it's really a pretty wonderful pedal, in my opinion. So that's the problem with the Tubescreamer. Possibly you're asking for it to do the wrong job, maybe.